War is hell, but it sure can be beautiful in a video game at least. And here EA DICE returns to their roots with World War II, a setting to deliver the promise of making a beautiful game. Ever since Battlefield 1942, and codename Eagle actually before that, the series has been known for technical excellence. Whether that is due to the immense scope of the game worlds, the amount of players, the introduction of incredible audioscapes, or just the sheer realism of its graphics. EA DICE have been without a doubt putting out beautiful games since the studio came into being. But it's not exactly surprising, right? The Frostbite engine and developers who use it always manage to make wonderful looking games. Battlefield 1 and Battlefront 2 are also incredibly fetching. We are still within the same generation of consoles this time around, so there's only so much iteration that can be done to make this already tuned engine shine but a bit brighter. And Battlefield 5 does this in two ways as I see it: refinement and revolution. With refinement, I mean the attention to detail regarding technology and assets, which these games and games on this engine have been utilizing for a while now. I spent a healthy amount of time earlier this year gushing about snow rendering in Battlefield 5's technical alpha. GPU particles, or just great looking particle effects work, are not at all new to the Battlefield series or Frostbite, but Battlefield 5 manages to artfully bring them into the game world where they do not become obvious as a flashy effect, but instead embellish the realism of scenes by adding idle and secondary motion. They're used for tons of incidental moving detail in the game world, like these leaves here, caught by turbulent wind forces and dredged along by character models. A number of levels in the game feature autumnal leaves or falling greenery just being pushed around. The same system is also being used to drive rain and snow particles used throughout the game. See, the maps themselves come in different modes and flavors with varying weather conditions. Rotterdam may be a sunny location usually, but then the downpour can start, changing the entire atmosphere. The rain rendered during these transitions is rather unique as it is driven by this GPU particle system. Instead of being camera-aligned sheets or just within the screen space view itself completely, the GPU particle system gives a sense of depth and placement in the world twofold by being both physicalized and properly lit. Every bit of rain can patter onto a surface, pool, and then fall off at an edge in great sheets. It is subtle and could easily be lost in the noise of all this hectic multiplayer mayhem in a game like this, but it is a surprisingly contemplative addition here. Notice how the water forms around the edge and dribbles off here on all the surfaces. It gives that great sense that the rain is a part of the world and not just layered on top of it in post. The second part of this has to do with lighting. GPU particles can be lit and shadowed to look cohesive with the world. Snow and rain take on the light of the surrounding point lights or the sun to a dramatic effect, giving them a depth within the world and placing them well within it. Like, check out how the gobs of rain here pouring from the sky take on a massive volumetric look as the V1 rocket here detonates. The GPU particles are so integrally used within the game world and for the level art that it is sometimes easy not to even notice them. Whether that is from little fires from broken machinery, or from dust motes hanging in the air around lampshades in forlorn houses, this is a refined use of an effects type which is usually gaudy or sometimes overbearing. When it combines with some of the rest of the game's art and technology, it can have a great effect. Here, just when shooting the water, we can see so many bits of technology making up the final effect. The central stream of the particle upshoot is comprised by a transparent camera-facing sprite, adorned with hundreds of GPU particles. That central column of jetting water is also reflected in the plane of water below it, and all the particles are properly shaded by the sun, and that central column of water is even casting wispy shadows on the semi-transparent water surface. When it comes together, it looks wonderful. So wonderful that you barely have the time to appreciate it in all the madness. Well, unless you're like me and join an empty server just to play around. Another bit of refinement that is also easy to forget about in the hecticness of it all is the attention to animation detail in this game. Combined with the report of weapons, the hard clang of metal on metal, Battlefield 5 has some seriously punchy looking animations. When mixed with per-object motion blur, the weight of each movement takes on a hard-hitting, snappy quality. And it's not just limited to weapons as well, as the game's movement system now has a greater feeling of bodied weight to it. You can lie on your back, belly, roll, and pitch to the side on diving and leaning out of bits of cover. This is an impressive feat for a multiplayer game that does not use a unified third and first person model set. It just feels nice vaulting and sliding around, natural. Also, I just love how characters when running through the environment look to fall, stumble, and rebound off of surfaces with all this inertia. Just look at this guy. There are tons of other details too, of course, too numerous to name and remember, like the semi-translucent cloth billowing in the wind, or the divots and absolute demolishing of terrain and cover after extended fighting. It really does have that granularity of destruction that we saw for the most part in Battlefield Bad Company 1 and 2. But that's all iterative, refined uses of things that the technology, the engine, and series have done for a while now. Where's the revolution there? Well, hear me out, but I'm mighty convinced that we are seeing something very, very special with EA DICE's implementation of DirectX 12 ray tracing, or DXR, which launches with the game simultaneously. I've been purposely showing off the PC version for the duration of this video with DXR enabled, and only on low by the way, as I'm convinced it is the premier version of the game, the artist's intention. DXR has been a known quantity for a while now since its announcement, with positive and negative takes, informed and less informed ones, but in the end here the visuals it offers, if you slow down to find the time and look and think about it, they're nothing less than wonderful. After years of cube maps and screen space reflections misrepresenting the nuances of surface reflections and material values, there's something just joyous about the world not disappearing as soon as you move the camera or as soon as an object gets in the way. And that's just the starting point. All of those points I covered in the wake of the initial announcement in the original video covering Battlefield 5's ray tracing still stand in this final product, and especially on the Ultra setting. Ray traced reflections offer a greater granularity, proper depth accuracy, and better representation of the game's materials than the legacy screen space reflections and cube map system really ever could. Full stop. Everything is better represented and reflects the tuned material values that the artists have set up. The ray traced reflections can capture detail which is so wonderfully accurate that I found myself giggling about it. Like here, how I can see my character model in the side reflection of this mirror on the truck, or how my character model's reflection warps and takes on differing levels of clarity in the glass or in the polished metal of this car here, or how the surface of this glass has both cleaning streaks, shadowing, and a darkened reflective environment around it. It just looks right. Previous systems could not represent these things as they lacked proper information like SSR, or cube maps could not as they were limited in resolution, placement, update rate, or at times levels of reflectivity, since many games only have a limited number of convolutions of cube maps that they can display. Icing on the cake here was my being able to see my character's model's face and eye in the rifle of my scope. God, I love that little bit of detail. Here's where I cross over into the discussion of the graphical options and performance considerations of ray tracing. As a revolution is so rarely bloodless, in its current state, DXR launches with 4 levels of use and fidelity: low, medium, high, and ultra. EA DICE currently recommends the low preset as real-time triangle ray tracing at 60 FPS on the GPU is not an easy feat. When going from ultra to low, at a cursory glance, this image will show smaller differences than one might expect, but the devil really is in the details. Starting at medium, this is where we see the largest compromises taking shape when coming down from ultra. For one, the roughness cutoff of those materials that received ray-traced reflections is raised, so duller metals, painted metals, duller wood surfaces, and the like just receive cube maps instead of ray-traced reflections. On average, it's not distracting, I would say, but it cannot be denied how cool it is that your gun's dull metal bits properly take on the immediate surrounding colors and tones on ultra. Another hit in general when going down between the settings are the maximum possible resolution, which affects the maximum ray count. In conversation with the developers, we know that the game is shooting out a variable amount of rays by binning and culling the amount of rays for your chosen resolution based upon a tiling up of the screen into 16 by 16 pixel boxes. If an area needs less rays, it reduces that box to keep up performance, but if the screen is full of reflections that are important, such as water, it will limit the full resolution and therefore the maximum possible ray count according to your settings. Ultra has a 40% resolution at max, high 31.6%, medium 23.3%, and low 15.5%. So the clarity of reflections is impacted when going down to low, which can be seen in the difference in pixelation of this lampshade's reflection here, for example. To stress it though, low is still giving you that ray-traced look, with the most important surfaces being accounted for, like water, mirrors, and polished metals and the like. The performance impact of ray tracing though is the sticking point at the moment, especially for those utilizing the lowest end RTX card with the RTX 2070, as is a single ray trace scene performs radically different than a rasterized one. Different levels also run differently due to the content in them. On an RTX 2080 Ti, some levels allow ray tracing at low with 60 FPS at 1620p or higher, but those are levels with snow or sand. Other levels require more intermediate resolutions to maintain 60 FPS, like 1296p here on Rotterdam. When you take into consideration the number of maps that have very obvious areas where ray tracing sees an immediate benefit, then the question of whether you want to use ray tracing becomes less favorable. On maps that are just dust and stone, with low or medium, you would really only see ray tracing on the most reflective metals, or glass sheets, or a random puddle on the roadside. But those maps with glass, modern structures, or water, well, ray tracing will have a profound difference on low, as the city maps of the game show. Ultra, on the other hand, will basically transform any scene that has slightly reflective materials. Ultra, though, has an ultra performance cost. So if you had to choose between 1440p at 120 FPS with rasterization, or 4K 60 FPS with rasterization, would you really choose 1440p or lower at 60 FPS with ray tracing? I don't know, it's really your decision. Since we are talking about real-time triangle ray tracing on the GPU for reflections here, there are compromises beyond resolution even when set to ultra. Certain facets of the rasterized world are not perfectly represented in reflections. Like here, the light masking and IES profile of this lamp is not reflected on ultra settings here, and you can clearly see it on the wall in the rasterized scene. Also, the culling distance and important distance for objects in the ray trace structure can cause a snap or pop for certain objects at times, but they're generally pretty far into the distance on average. It does make me wonder though if there's a way to make that more granular and less poppy. Dithering perhaps of some sort? Well, thankfully I can have some of these questions answered, as we at Digital Foundry have had the privilege of talking with the developers about ray tracing in Battlefield 5, so we can get information how it currently functions and what the plans for the future are, and they honestly seem quite bright. As is, the developers at DICE responsible for the DXR implementation see it as a work in progress, with a number of optimizations, quality improvements, and even driver improvements, both with an imminent patch and down the road as the title is supported in the coming months. Currently, they find the various quality presets too binary and are looking to play around with culling distance and LODs in the ray trace structure to allow for more performance and more quality for those who seek it. A number of quality and performance improvements have also not made it to the day one launch, even though they are already there in development builds, such as the ability to run various compute shaders used for ray tracing in parallel, which should release to the game after a driver-side update. Likewise, the release build of the game missed out on the inclusion of a hybrid ray marched and ray trace system. This intelligent idea combines screen space tracing with world space tracing. This will treat screen space rays and BVH traced rays in the same manner and then apply them together. So the moment when a screen space ray breaks for the various reasons that they do, it will continue on as a ray traced ray beyond screen space, with no visual discontinuity between the two. This should aid in performance and touch up quality perchance in areas where pop-in might occur with the current implementation. The game as is also currently shipped with a number of known bugs in the ray traced implementation that affect some levels or all levels. All levels are currently affected by a bounding box bug, which makes ray tracing more expensive than it should be due to the existence of destructible terrain. Also, levels that use fake god rays and a certain type of foliage erroneously send out many more rays than they should. There's only so much I can reasonably mention here, so be sure to check out the accompanying written article, which has many more details as to how ray tracing currently works in-game and how it's going to be working in the future. But that's enough about ray tracing for the moment. How does both PC with and without RTX compare to the best that the consoles have to offer on Xbox One X? When loading up the first real mission beyond the prologue, you can see some differences right away. Compared with PC Ultra, 4K 60 FPS, and on an RTX 2080 Ti, you can immediately see the hallmarks that nearly all Frostbite games have had on console. First, notice the lack of screen space reflections on Xbox One X, meaning the specularity of all objects is controlled either by direct lights or cube maps, making everything kind of overly glow. This is the equivalent to the PC's medium post-processing setting. It can also look kind of weird on water on Xbox One X, as there's only a cube map deciding the reflection, especially if you put it right next to ray tracing. On PC Standard Ultra, you get SSR helping control that improper reflection color, but still SSR has errors, especially when it is occluded or when no information is available, like on these rocks on the side here. Running RTX on Ultra here at 1296p clears up these misgivings with the image. Furthermore, in spite of the different gamma curve, you can see how the character's ambient occlusion, or just the general ambient occlusion in the background here, is different than the PC Ultra with HBAO. As per Frostbite standard, it uses SSAO here on console. Also note how the rocks here look different and have reduced levels of displacement on Xbox One X in comparison to Ultra. Yep, Xbox One X's terrain setting, controlling the ground displacement via tessellation, looks to be PC's medium. Proceeding forward a bit, you may notice how much less rain there is in general on Xbox One X, and this one took me by surprise. Here, in comparison to PC on Ultra, Xbox One X either uses the medium or low setting here, which shows very little difference between the two. And the rest of the settings, well, medium's gonna be a common theme here. Running forward, you see a lamp. Woo! Well, the distance to that lamp and the distance which it pops in is the equivalent to the medium mesh setting here on PC. The further away this lamp pops in, the higher the setting is, going up to Ultra. Moving a bit forward, you can see how that lamp's point light draws in at a different distance than the model itself. The distance that draws in on Xbox One X makes it the equivalent to the PC's medium lighting setting here. And lastly, there's the game's undergrowth setting, which is a bit hard to pin down since there's some procedural scattering of things here and there, but it looks to be the only outlier of the entire bunch. Here, undergrowth seems to be the equivalent of high on PC. Yep, Xbox One X runs at a near flat medium across the board, but the game does not look terrible like this, of course, and it is a great starting point for optimizing settings on lower and mid-range GPUs. But that conversation about mid-range GPUs or the cost of ray tracing across the RTX line will have to wait for another day, as this video is getting quite long as it is. As it is, I really hope you enjoyed this video covering Battlefield 5's graphical advances on PC. Next to its top-notch effects work, the team have taken on the daunting task of being the first developers to release this type of ray tracing, which undoubtedly is going to become very important to graphics in general as time goes on. It reminds me of a different time period, before, like Quake or Crysis, where the leap in complexity was great and the performance was steep. Crysis ran at sub 30 FPS on the best GPU out there at resolutions like 1024x768 or 1280x1024, while high-end monitors from its day were running at 1600x1200 or 1080p. And as my colleague John Linneman could easily attest, Quake thrashed CPUs at the time of its release. Yet here we are with Battlefield 5, where it can achieve 60 FPS at 1080p or at higher resolutions depending upon the preset or level of ray tracing chosen. Comparatively, this is honestly a much better situation than we've had in the past when transformative new technologies are introduced. And heck, if you even wanted to, you could push for 4K at the moment with 30 FPS targets if you really wished. Or just do like we did in the past and await for inevitable GPUs of the future, like we did in PC games of yore. But that's enough from me for now. If you liked what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And be sure to check out the article on our website for more details. If you are already a subscriber, consider hitting that bell button in the corner to be informed as soon as Digital Foundry posts a video. If you would like to talk to me about ray tracing in Battlefield 5 or just in general, write a comment below or follow me and Digital Foundry on Twitter. And as always, this is Alex, bidding you farewell und auf Wiedersehen.